Well, we're going to be in Genesis 5, but we're not going to stay there because the man we're going to be talking about tonight only has a verse there. So if you want to get out your Bibles, we're going to be moving around a little bit more tonight than we normally would as we talk about an amazing man. We're studying through and looking at different characters in the Bible. And today we're going to be studying through the life and thinking about the life of a man named Enoch. Can you imagine living in a very dark world, a dark time, and yet your life is standing out among all the men in that time? So much so that this is what is recorded of you. If you're there in Genesis chapter 5 and you look at verse 24, it says, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That's pretty much it. It tells us who his father was, how long he lived, and who his children were. But that's pretty much it. That's what we learn about the man named Enoch. Now, there are other places in the Bible that we learn a little bit about him, and we will look at those texts. But let's just pause for just a second and be amazed at these words and this statement, this testimony about the life of the man named Enoch. It says, he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That means that Enoch was walking with God, very similarly to how we saw Adam and Eve walking with God in the garden. And all of a sudden, one day, Enoch stopped walking with God on this earth in the same domain as everyone else. And all of a sudden, he was taken away from this earth and taken to a place where he could be with God forever. Now, that's an amazing statement, and an amazing idea, an amazing thought in the midst of the discussion of the fall of mankind. We've been learning about how Adam and Eve fell, how they were given everything. They had this beautiful paradise that they enjoyed, and they were told not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They were kicked out of the garden because of that sin, and no longer blessed with everything as easy as it had previously come to them. They would have to work, and they would experience tremendous pain as they bore children. And we learned about Cain and Abel and how there was fighting over the fact that Cain's sacrifice was not regarded by God, and Abel's was. And so we saw sin starting to develop inside of man as Cain became very selfish and self-focused and rebelled against God, and eventually was caused to be an outcast even more so than Adam and Eve. But now here we've had generations that have come in chapter 5. And we're going through the list and learning about men who lived extremely long years of life on earth. And we're just moving through the descendants of a man named Seth. In chapter 4, we learned about descendants of Cain, and that didn't look too good. That kind of went south pretty quick, that men were being very vengeful, that they were murdering already in chapter 4. We learned about Lamech, who had killed somebody and said, if anyone's cursed who kills Cain, they'll surely be cursed if they were to kill me, because I have killed the man too. They completely twisted the truth, and everything is growing more and more wicked and evil. Men are not walking with God. Men are calling on the name of the Lord, it says in chapter 4. And perhaps that means calling for God to fix what's wrong in society. Perhaps it means calling for God to forgive them. But in chapter 5, we're reading about the descendants of Seth, and there's not a whole lot of information given about anybody. And so it really just paints for us a kind of dark picture that things are degrading, things are devolving. That men are growing more and more corrupt and selfish. In chapter 6, we see that is absolutely the case. That is exactly what is going on in society. And here in chapter 5, what we read is that Enoch stood out. That Enoch somehow, some way, was able to figure out a way to get away from the curse, a way to get away from the downfall of mankind and falling into the temptation of sin, which everyone before him, most likely, has fallen into. Abel, maybe not. Abel seemed pretty innocent and good, but we're not read everything about him. But there's something about Enoch that's just totally Totally different. And it gives everyone a glimmer of hope as they read this, because up until Enoch, there's not much hope. Everything seems to be going south really quick for mankind. And so we're forced to kind of, as we're reading through, it's like this huge list of genealogy that nobody likes to read, but we're forced to stop and read this a second time. All of a sudden, here's a man who walked with God, and all of a sudden he was not, and then God took him, and that's it. And we're left with lots of questions, wondering, what is this all about? And what does it mean to do what Enoch did? That's pretty much the path that we're going to go down tonight is, we don't have a ton of information about Enoch's life. I can't really embellish this or make up any stories about what happened when Enoch was a boy or whenever Enoch dealt with difficult times. He didn't slay Goliath. He wasn't the king or didn't do anything bad and then have to repent of it. There's no details like that in the life of Enoch. But what we can think about is the idea of what he did. What does it mean to walk with God? How can we walk with God? That's what I want to know. Because what happened to Enoch was he walked with God and then he was not, for God took him. There's only two other men in the Bible that it says they didn't experience death. It was Enoch, and then the other two men are Elijah, who was taken up in a whirlwind, and Jesus experienced death, was resurrected, and then he ascended. After being alive, he ascended into heaven. So there's only two that really never experienced death, and Jesus experienced death, but then he resurrected, and then he went up to be with God. So we want to know this. What does it mean to walk with God? How are we going to do this? And why would we want to do what it takes to walk with God? Because it's not necessarily an easy thing. So we're going to work our way through those three questions. First question, what does it mean to walk with God like Enoch? Have you ever been for a walk? Do you like to go for walks? My wife and I, we've been walking since before we were married. We used to go in college to parks and we'd walk the trails. And whenever we got married, we still go for walks at different parks in the area. It's a great way to connect to one another, great way to talk to each other. We've taken our kids on walks. And sometimes they didn't really want to, but we did it anyway. But it's a really good way to talk to one another. It's a way for us to communicate with one another. Whenever you're really busy, whenever there's TVs to distract you and all this other stuff going on, it's really good to just get outside and walk and to experience nature and to communicate with one another. It's a good time for you to get together and talk about your concerns and your desires and your thoughts about life in general and what's going on with family and friends and things like that. And so as we walk together, we're experiencing a closeness. We're drawing closer together, nearer together, and we're becoming one with each other. And I think that's really what the picture is of this walking with God. There is a oneness in the direction. There's a oneness in the pace. And it's an image that's supposed to represent your way of life. It's not as though Enoch would go out for a walk and leave his home and God would come up alongside him and walk with him and talk with him. Maybe that's happened, maybe. But really this is an idea that Enoch was communicating with God and he was desiring to understand God, and God was with him and helping him, and they were talking it out. They were figuring out life together, and they were joining together in their desires and in their plans and in the things that they wanted to do, sharing their intimate thoughts and their intimate desires with one another. This is what happens whenever we go for a walk, if we're doing it right. Now, nowadays I could get on and I could just put my podcast on, or I could listen to my audiobook, and we could be walking and not really paying attention to each other. But you're supposed to actually grow closer together. And this is an opportunity to grow in love and closeness with one another. And so that's kind of the picture of what it means to walk with God like Enoch is. You're growing closer to God. You're understanding Him more. You're expressing yourself to Him. And He is teaching you and training you, and you're learning His way and His will, and you're learning to do what He does and to be like Him. You're making your plans line up and work out together so that you can be joined together in your destination and in the path path that you're trying to go. So overall, it's just a beautiful picture of how we live our lives. Do we think of our lives as walking with God? That He is with us, that He is abiding with us. It's a great song that we just sang, calling for God to abide with us. That He is with us and that all of our decisions and everything that we're going through is being done with consideration of God, who is with us, who cares about us. And are we considering His will and His ways and His desires for our lives? And are we trying to connect with Him through our study of Scripture and through our prayer? And I think really that's essentially what you're getting the picture of with Enoch, is he has developed a relationship with God. It's not just that he knows about God and he tries to do things that will appease him and make him happy and maybe cause him to bless him some and not curse him. It's that he really genuinely cares about God and he wants to be with God and he wants to do what God wants him to do. They're walking together is a picture of them joining together. So this is why it says Enoch walked with God, because he was making his life all about the will of God. He knew the difference between what was right and what was wrong, between good and evil, because Adam ate of that fruit and everybody after it experienced that. And he was desiring to do what was good and to refrain from doing what was evil. That was what he made his life about. Was he perfect in that? Nobody is, except Jesus. But it doesn't matter that he wasn't perfect. He was living it out. And so whenever we consider walking with God, we have to realize this is talking about us conforming our life to a standard of godliness, to live a certain way where we could be in the presence of God and God could be in our presence and we wouldn't need to just be zapped because we are just so in a different area, different way of walking, different zone than God would ever walk in. We are already in the path where God would find us. So how do we do this? Well, I think we go to Hebrews 11 and we see the picture as we continue to look at passages that talk about Enoch. Go to Hebrews chapter 11, one of the other passages that mention Enoch. There's only 3. Hebrews 11, and of course this is about the heroes of faith. That's what we call this passage. Enoch is brought up pretty early because it does kind of go chronologically. It mentions Abel offering a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. But then whenever we come to verse 5, it says, by faith Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death. And he was not found because God had taken him. Now, before he was taken up, he was commended as having pleased God. And look at verse 6. It clarifies this idea of faith. He says that without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Here we see a little bit more information about Enoch. How is it that he was considered righteous enough to walk with God? So righteous that God would take him up and allow him to not experience death. Well, this verse tells us it was because he had faith. By faith, he was taken up. Because he had this childlike trust and dependence on God and a submission to God, God took him up to be with him. And so this is the chief characteristic of Abel's sacrifice, that he gave of the firstborn of his flock, is kind of a picture that he's giving his best because he's trusting God, he's believing in God. And this is the same picture with Enoch. He was living his life in such a way that he was honoring God, believing that he was good and that he could be counted on to provide for him. And he was trusting God to do good things toward him and to be good. And he was submitting his life to the will of God. And so as we read this, we see faith is the essential part of walking with God. And what does Paul say? We walk by faith, not by sight. This is essentially what we make our life about. We make our life about trusting that God exists and that the things that he desires for us to do are good for us. We trust it. I love the Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. You probably know the text. I could probably quote it, but I'll probably mess it up because I do that a lot. But Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." That's a beautiful picture for us. A passage that was given to me whenever I graduated high school. I received, I think it was a card that said that, or a plaque or something like that. And I had it for a long time. It's probably in a shoebox somewhere. But this is a wonderful text for us to live our lives by. This is what it means to walk with God. You trust in him with all your heart. You're not leaning on your own understanding. And instead, you're acknowledging him and you're desiring for him to work to straighten out your path so that you live a very godly and righteous life. And this takes tremendous trust because the world is telling us, oh, that's not the right way. Whatever God says is wrong. Look at all these other people who are doing different things. Look how successful they are. Look how much better their life is because they don't do what God tells you you should do, what is good. They just bend the rules a little bit. And here we see that really what we should do is not rely on our own understanding. We shouldn't rely on what looks like it would be a good idea, but we should trust what God says. And that's essential for us to walk with God. We have to trust him. Like a child needing someone to lead them in the right way that they should go. We need God to lead us and to guide us in the way that we should go. And so in order for us to walk with God, it starts with faith. Faith that what he says is truly what is good for us. And that his righteous way of living, the godly way of living, is the way that he is pleased with and he will find acceptable. Another passage that we think about in regards to this idea of walking by faith and walking with God is Micah. And if you remember Micah chapter 6, 6 verse 8, a passage we've been quoting a lot. What does God desire from you, O man? But that you, I told you, I'm really bad at quoting. I was like, I'm not going to find this minor prophet. I flipped right to it. All right, Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Verse 8, "He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God." That's a picture for us that God is pleased when we do justice, when we love kindness and mercy, and we walk humbly with him. This is God's desire for us. He's pretty simple. It's not too complicated. Don't overcomplicate things. What did he do with Adam in the garden and Eve? He was walking with them. You see, this is a desire God has. He desires our relationship. He desires our companionship. And we need to choose to walk with him. If we choose to walk in the path of unrighteousness and ungodliness, he can't join us there. And so we must choose the path of justice. We must choose the path of kindness or mercy and humility. And instead of the pride and the self-serving attitude of the people around us, we must choose to love what is good and right. And that will lead to God walking with us. Well, that's kind of been leading us to the third text that tells us about Enoch. If you go back to the New Testament and look at Jude, the next text that talks about Enoch is Jude, a book we don't use very much, but it does tell us about Jude, and it tells us about a prophecy of Enoch, which is interesting. So if you look at Jude verse 14, Jude, the brother of Jesus, says this: "It was about these," and he's been talking about ungodly people who are rebellious and defiant. And he says, "It was about these that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment on all and to convict all the ungodly of all their deeds of ungodliness that they have committed in such an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things that ungodly sinners have spoken against him. These are grumblers, malcontents, following their own sinful desires. They are loudmouthed boasters, showing favoritism, to gain advantage. We see here that Jude is relaying for us some information we don't have anywhere else in the Bible. It's in a book called First Enoch, which is not in the biblical canon. But he quotes that and he says, Enoch said this. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied against ungodliness. And so there's kind of a picture for us that if we are going to walk with God, that's going to mean we are not walking with the ungodly. In fact, we're recognizing that we're rebels against the world. We're rebels against those who walk against God. You can't walk with God and walk with the world. It's physically impossible because the world is going in a totally different direction than God is. They live in ungodliness. You can just imagine trying to walk with somebody who really does not want to walk with you. Someone who is pulling your arm and trying to force you to go a different way, or they're constantly getting distracted and going off somewhere else and not really paying any attention to you or wanting to be with you. God says that those people, Enoch says, those people are going to be judged. And so he has chosen not to follow them. He's rebelling against those people, and he's choosing to leave them behind and to walk with God. And that's essentially how we can walk with God. We rebel against the ways of this world, and instead we choose the good path that God has set before us, trusting that it is for our good. So this is this is how we walk with God. We choose what is righteous. We choose what is good. We seek out God's will and God's ways in everything that we do. The third idea is, why should we want to do this? You ever think about the idea of walking with God? And what that's like, what that would be like to be in God's presence, to be physically walking beside or with God. I mean, that's an amazing idea for us to even consider. And this is kind of the picture that he's given to us. Why would we want to do that? Well, I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it? That this is a wonderful idea, wonderful thought. This is where we're supposed to be. This is our purpose. This is why he created us, as we saw in the Garden of Eden. Like, he wants us to walk with him. And if we were to walk with him, we would be pleasing our Creator and fulfilling our purpose. You want satisfaction in life? Fulfill your purpose. Fulfill the reason why you were created. Don't try to find some satisfaction somewhere else. No, if you want satisfaction, do what God created you to do. You fit here. You fit in the path of godliness. This is where you're supposed to be. Everything else is corruption. Everything else is messed up. But this is where we're supposed to be. And if you think about this, you turn to Romans chapter 11. I love what Paul says. If you think about what we have and the opportunity that we have to walk with God, to be with God, are you not amazed? Listen to what Paul says in Romans chapter 11, starting at verse 33. We're going to study Romans one of these days. It blows my mind. I love the book of Romans, but this is kind of the end of a huge section that is just full of wonder and amazement at what God has done for us in giving us salvation. Verse 33, oh, the depth and the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, and how inscrutable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor, or who has given a gift to him that he might be repaid? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be glory forever. Amen. Consider the extreme privilege this is. The idea, the thought that we could walk with God, that God would be our counselor. Have you ever thought it would be a really cool idea? It'd be really cool if you could just have a lunch with somebody somebody who maybe is a very successful entrepreneur, a very successful business person, very successful, or maybe a person who's just so charitable and so kind and gentle, and you read about them, you learn about them, and you just wish you could just have a lunch with them. You just wish you could just spend a little bit of time and understanding how it is that they can be such a wonderful person, whatever it is. Well, consider how much better it would be to walk with God. How unsearchable are His wisdom and His ways and His judgments, and how unfathomable the depth of the riches of all the knowledge and understanding that God has in store for those who are willing to just come and walk with Him and talk with Him and listen to Him. I mean, this is the path to understanding life, the path to understanding God. He's not a closed book. He is an open book. We just have to read it. We just have to see it for ourselves and be amazed at the knowledge and the wisdom that He wants to provide us. We have to seek it and desire it. I love also Psalm 34. If you will, turn over to Psalm 34. We're going to read a couple verses there. Y'all aren't used to this, are you? It's a lot of turning for me. Psalm 34. I think we just studied this in Bible class. I missed the Bible class and I was kicking myself. Psalm 34. And look what the psalmist says about our God. To start with, verse 4, it says, I sought the Lord and He answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to Him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. I mean, that's good stuff right there. That he sought the Lord, He answered, and it says, those who look to Him are radiant, their faces shall never be ashamed. If you want to walk with God and talk with God, it's going to change who you are, and it's going to make you radiant and glorious. The more like Him we become, the more glorious we become. And that's what God wants for us. He wants to share His glory with us. Verse 8 says, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in Him. Again, a beautiful picture that if we're willing, we can have an experience of being with God, walking with God and talking with God and experiencing His wisdom and His knowledge being poured inside of us. And if we'll just taste it, we will see. This is an acquired taste. I don't know if you've come to know that or not, but this is an acquired taste. It takes time and effort to develop your skills of interpretation and understanding and application. But as you do, it becomes sweeter than honey. And it has tremendous impact on all of our lives. And also I love this in verse 18. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones, and none of them are broken. Affliction will slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of His servants. None of those who take refuge in Him will be condemned. Now, in this part, you have a lot. There's a statement that walking with God is not necessarily going to mean a pleasurable, easygoing life. In fact, the righteous are going to be suffering afflictions, is what he says. And then there's kind of a reference to Jesus. He keeps all His bones, not one of them is broken. So a very clear picture that, like Jesus, those who walk with God might suffer affliction. And yet there's also this picture, God is near to the brokenhearted. He saves the crushed spirit, and He delivers and He redeems all those who take refuge in Him. So even though walking with God is not giving you a pass to an easy and, successful life on this earth, we see it is giving you a life that is extremely valuable and worth living. Let me get my water. I put it here this morning. So this is a wonderful illustration for us to consider that we can walk with God. And it should be something that we're striving after every day. That God is with us and that we are with God, that we're learning from Him, that He hears us in all of our struggles. He is drawing near to us and we're drawing near to Him, and we're closely growing to an alignment of the same path of godliness and righteousness, and the destination is that we get to be with Him eternally. And that's really what God desires for us. That's what He has laid out for us in His Word, that is the end destination of those who walk with God. Like Enoch, we can be taken up and we can be with God forever. And that's what He ultimately has in store for us. Death has no sting over us, much like it had no sting for Enoch. So as we think about this, hopefully you see walking with God is a wonderful illustration for us to live by. And we need to be pursuing the life that is walking in the path of righteousness and goodness. And we need to understand that if we lose this path, if we stop trusting in the Lord and we start leaning on our own understanding, we're endangering our souls. We're turning to a path that God cannot go down, and He cannot walk with us there. We must call out for Him. He will come to us and He will help us to return. But we must humble ourselves and remain on the good path and enjoy a relationship with Him rather than choosing the ways of this world. There's a movie that we just recently watched. It's called, oh man, I can't stand the name of it. It's something about Lost on a Mountain in Maine. I think that's the name of it. It's Angel streaming service has it. But it's like, Lost on a Mountain in Maine. What is that? Well, it's about a little boy who, maybe 100 years ago, something like that, went up on the mountain in Maine with his brothers and his dad and a guide. And he ended up, there's a storm up at the top of the hill. He got in a fight with his brother, and he was told by the guide, get down, get in the trees, and he ran and he got lost. He got away from his guide, and he was real scared, and he was just remembering what his father taught him to just keep going, and follow the water. There's always going to be people around water, and he keeps going, and it turns into a long time. He ends up walking for days and traveling miles and surviving somehow off of the land. And they were searching for him, trying to find him, and he was nowhere near the trail. He couldn't find the trail. He ended up 80 miles away from the trail. After 9 days, he found civilization, found a house by the creek, and he was able to be restored to his father. But as you think about that, I think that's just kind of a really good picture for us about our life and our journey. If we get off the path, if we leave the guide, then we're in a dangerous situation, and we need to find someone who can help us get back on the right path. We need our guide with us. We need to remember the words and the teachings of our Father. That's what he relied on in order to find civilization and hope. And we need to find our way back to God. But really, it would just be so much easier if we wouldn't have stubbornly fought with our brother, and if during the storm we kept our head and we remained on the path that we're supposed to go down. And really, that's what we all need to focus on. As God's people, we need to be sure that we stay on God's path, that we pursue the path of righteousness. We don't give it up, no matter what comes our way, because having a closeness to God is really all that matters in this life. And if you have not been close to God, if you've gotten away from God, we want to encourage you and help you to get back on the right path. And we want to lead and guide others who are out there who are lost back to the right path and help them to see the value of walking with God again. We all need to, if we're lost in that way, humbly turn ourselves back, call for God's salvation, call for Him to help us, and start walking down the path of righteousness again, like Enoch did, and experience the joy of one day walking, and the walk just continues up into heaven, and we get to live and be with God for all eternity. If you're here tonight and you need to make your life right, or if you need to ask for prayers in some way, this is an opportunity for you. Please come as we stand and as we sing.